ever leave this world alive, I'll come back down and sit beside your feet tonight. Wherever I am, you'll always be more than just a memory. Well, if I ever leave this world alive.
Hey folks, Professor Finn here, and today, reports of my death are greatly exaggerated. I have not recorded a video in quite some time. But when a brother asks, a brother does. So a very good friend, a beloved fraternity brother of mine from college sent me a text message, said, hey, I would love to see a reaction video to this video I'm sending you. So let's go ahead and dive into this. Now, first thing I can see just by looking at the thumbnail and whatnot is, one, we're at wired.com. So obviously we have a bastion of journalistic integrity here. So I think this is going to be somewhere between like Vox.com and The Guardian, maybe like somewhere in between. So I'm not going to say I don't have a high expectation, but the bar is pretty low because it's Wired. Good news is it is a recent video, so May 5th, 2020, or May 7th, 2021. So, you know, hey, whatever. So I do not know Mr. Sweeney. I am unfamiliar with this channel. The people that pop up on my stuff are like Caleb Wilde, Carrie the Mortician pops up now and then, Caitlin Doty pops up. But I do not know this dude or his channel, so I'm assuming that he must have a channel because Wired's not going to pull some funeral director from out of the blue here. So love the mug, love the Pope Benedict mug with all the mortuary instruments just kind of stuffed in there. The little mini casket and the little. In fact, you want to know something, folks? Those models of like those ancient cars from the 1920s, ancient, but antique cars, better word. Those are quite expensive. Those are very expensive. And if you ever want to see one of these things up front, go to the Commonwealth Institute in Texas, and they host the National Museum of Funeral Service History, and they have quite a number of these antique hearses and funerary cars. And they are massive. Something like that is probably the size of like a UPS truck. I mean, it's just absolutely huge. It's a beast of a vehicle. So enough BS. Let's go ahead and dive in and check this out.
Yeah, I don't know if I'll talk about them all, but I got all sorts of fun blood draining devices.
Dude, you got like 3 tools there.
This one
you can talk about them all. Yep, that's a mouth closer.
Hi, I'm Victor M. Sweeney, and I'm a licensed funeral director and mortician, and this is Mortician Support. This is a question from Saint Severin. Question for morticians. When someone dies, do you remove their poo, or are we all buried with an unpooed poo? That is such a good question. More often than not,
that's not a good question.
Up to you. Sometimes you hear the myth that everybody poos themselves before they die. That's not always the case. Sometimes it is. For my purposes, when I get someone back to the funeral home and I'm preparing them, if they have pooed, then I'll clean them up. If it's the case that they start pooing when pressure starts to build up in the abdomen, then I stop what I'm doing, I clean them up. Typically what I'll do is I'll actually flush out the bowels with the hose, because the last thing you want to have happen is someone to start pooing and then they continue doing it when you can't control it.
So I know what he said from a practitioner standpoint, and I know the way that a layperson would interpret that. So the first thing is when you pass away, obviously your muscles at some point will relax, and not all the time. So he's absolutely correct about that. You're not always going to encounter feces and other biological matter down in the buttocks area. We are absolutely going to clean it. No ifs, ands, or buts. You are going to clean that. And when you are doing human preservation, if the body is continuing to unload that biological matter, there's really no reason to stop what you're doing to stop it right there and then. I mean, it's going to continue doing it. And yeah, you can go in and you can continue to clean, but that is just not a very time effective or a very effective way of spending your time when you are preparing a body. From a preservation standpoint, in the way it's taught in schools and the way it's explained in text, you just let the body do what the body's going to do. And when you're done, that's when you address the issue to make sure it does not continue after that. Now, I don't know what he means in regard, and it can go one of two ways. So if he is saying he is taking a hose and he is putting water into the colon and basically giving the body an enema to flush things out, I don't know too many morticians that do that. I'm not saying that maybe not be that is not a bona fide practice or has some merit. I'm saying that I don't know too many people that do it, and I would not do that personally. If he's just saying he's going to take the table water and he's going to clean the body externally, then just about everyone should be doing that. There is a professional obligation to do that, and from my uneducated opinion, you definitely have a moral and an ethical obligation to do stuff like that. You want the decedents clean as they are being dressed and being laid out for their funeralization. So I'm glad to see that we're starting off with like a really technical, high-end question that exhibits the finest of what the internet
Hated
has to
number
offer
one.
on
If a person
poo.
wearing contacts dies, does the mortician take them out? Shower thoughts. Yes, historically, I've always removed contact lenses because one of the things that we need to do, of course, is what we call set the features. Setting the features would mean that we close the mouth, and we also need to close their eyes. So we actually have a device that helps us do this. These are called eye caps. They're essentially spiky contact lenses that fit over the eyes.
That's
and will
exactly how I
actually
tell my
grip
students
the
what they are.
eyelid when we pull it down over those little burrs
Mhm.
there. I typically remove contact lenses because those just get in the way of me doing what I need to do to set their features and provide a decent appearance for the family.
So, again, I don't know Mr. Sweeney. I don't know what his experience is. I don't know how many bodies he's prepped. And to the state where I'm at, maybe I had just over 100 bodies when I was in practice from like 2006, 2007, when I was an intern / apprentice, all the way to 2012 when I left practice to become an academic. And yeah, since then, I average about roughly anywhere between 90 to 120, 130 bodies per year in my clinical laboratories. I have never encountered contacts in a dead person, ever, period. Never. Not once. So, well, how do you know? Because I check every body. Duh. Okay. So, yes, I am looking at eyes because there are very valuable things you can learn from the eyes when you have to make your educated guess on how to embalm the body. You are going to look at the eyes every single time because there are certain indicators of jaundice that will first appear in the eyes that you're dealing with that type of condition, which can greatly affect your preservative outcome if you're not reading the conditions of the decedent correctly. As for them being a complicating factor for closing the eyes, no, just no. Because you're going to take an eye cap and put it on top of the thing, and the eye cap is still going to grip the lid. And the contact is not going to cause the eye cap to move around. So, from that standpoint, I'm just going to say, yeah, take them out because there's no reason for them to be there. And then use your eye caps. And there are other methods of closing the eyes. So when you die, yeah, your muscles relax, but also at some point, your muscles are in a constant state of tension when you're alive. So if we do not do something generally to get the eyes down and keep them closed, they will retract slightly. And eye caps are the most common way to go ahead and take care of a situation like that. But other tricks we can use are little pieces of cotton with a little bit of maybe super glue adhesive to keep the eyelids down. Sometimes you get very, very, very frail eyelids, and you can actually see the eye caps through them. And when you have that type of situation, generally what I would do at that point is I would put the cotton underneath because that gives a much more natural presentation because everything is about appearance. Okay, when we prepare dead human bodies, human remains, we want the appearance to be pleasant so that when families are grieving that they're not going through the added stress of something looking completely ridiculous. But yeah, if they're there, take them out, but I've never had a body with them. No, they're not really going to interfere with anything because you're putting the eye cap completely over the orbit. But okay, no, there's no bad information so far. There's no bad information. He's responding very well to some of these questions. So, good for him.
Question from Laney. Will my cat eat me when I die? Possibly. Hopefully. I think the short answer to that is yes. I've heard of that happening from colleagues of mine. And as we all know, cats being inferior to dogs, they will do anything.
So, shocker. if you are dead on the floor and you have pets around you, they are probably going to consume you because you're the only source of food. And when they get hungry enough, they will do whatever it takes for them to survive because they're biological organisms. So I like how he says, cats are different than dogs. At the end of the day, they are biological animals that are starving to death and will do whatever it takes in order to sustain themselves. So yes, I can't tell you that I have ever had a case like that personally. Like he says, we all have colleagues that say that someone's animal did something, but the good news is in the United States, most bodies are found before something like that really happens. Because the odors will attract neighbors or concerned relatives, or somebody will notice something before that happens. But yeah, the stories are out there. I'm sure it happens because animals are animals. I don't want to call pets vermin, but at the end of the day, vermin will consume dead bodies. So let's go to the next one.
From Vamp Florence. How do morticians not want to chug the embalming fluid? These look like they taste like Fruit Loops. Well, I really love the picture you have, and I noticed you forgot the blue flavor. Embalming fluid is really colorful, but I can assure you it is not tasty. It smells awful. As far as the coloring goes, it is strange, isn't it? One of the reasons that a lot of these fluids are maybe red or other colors is so that the embalmer knows what they are without having to maybe read the label. But you'll also notice that a couple of them are red. When we push the blood out of the body in arterial embalming, we're pushing out a red fluid. So ideally, we want to put a red fluid back in. So we gain access to an artery. Typically, we'll make an incision, maybe in the neck or in the thigh. And then we'll also gain access to a vein. We open the artery. We are going to have an embalming machine, which acts as a pump. And we're going to use this arterial tube, something like this. So this goes down the artery, and then it's going to pump fluid through. Now your vein...
That would probably go somewhere in your leg, folks. It's a relatively long one.
Either a large forceps or this device called a drain tube. So this goes down the vein, and then when we open it, the blood will pour out the side of our device here. And then we can control how quickly or how slowly we want the blood to leave the body. When we have a deceased loved one, they're going to look very, very pale because the blood has stopped circulating. So when we put in the red blood, the red fluid rather, that's actually going to pink them up in some ways and make them look a little bit more alive.
So he's absolutely right. He's absolutely right. If this goes a little out of sequence, because right in the middle as he was talking, as I'm watching a video, one of those 5-second ads pops up. So the first thing is so he's not wrong. Okay, so a little bit earlier on, when you show the picture, said, we can basically tell what they are by a glance. He's actually very right about that. If we look in the cabinet and we see blues, generally we know that is not something that is used for arterial injection. Blues, greens, stuff like that are chemicals that are never going to be injected into an artery. Anything that's a red, a pink, orangish, yes. And so your skin, if you remove all the garbage from it, okay, melanin, keratin, etc., your skin is generally like a straw color. And within your skin, you have cellular components like keratin, which is orange. You have melanin, which is brown. And the last color that makes natural skin tone is the red from your hemoglobin in your blood. Now, when you die, the pump stops, and like any liquid, when the pump stops, it will settle. And what normally is a constant emulsion, okay, it's just it's a constant compound of your blood and other products and fluid in your flowing through your system, all these particulates start to settle, okay? And we call this livor mortis. It's the settling of the blood into dependent areas. When we embalm, we are trying to put some of that lost color back in. And he uses the term red, and he is not wrong. Primarily, they are all reds and oranges, but there are a variety of different colored dyes out there. And really skilled embalmers will know exactly what type of dyes go into what type of bodies to achieve the maximum cosmetic effect. Ideally, when we embalm bodies with our arterial preservatives, we're trying to get as much of that cosmetic effect from the blood in there so we don't have to use any external cosmetic on the skin. The more natural they can look, the happier we are, because the whole classes and categories of bodies may not wear makeup. As for how do embalmers not want to drink the stuff, because we're not stupid, we know it can kill us. Everything in there is really, really nasty, including the formaldehyde-free preservative chemicals that are on the market. So it's really easy for us not to want to go do that. But I suppose if you are one of these mouth-breathing idiots that has to chew on a Tide Pod, you would have incentive to see if, the schnozberries taste like schnozberries with the arterial fluid.
This is a question from Clementine.
Hi, Clementine.
Full disclosure, I'm fat, and this is a legit question.
I'm fat.
I'm not trying to be fat phobic,
Really
but
bad.
how do extremely obese people, like I'm talking 400 plus pounds, fit in a coffin?
Okay.
Do they make a plus size coffin?
Mhm.
Or does a mortician cut fat out of them and sew them back up? You can answer the second part of that question first. No, we do not remove fat and sew someone back up. Everybody is buried intact if we can at all help it. So we actually have caskets that are made by our manufacturer to be oversized. Typically, when someone passes away, if they're larger, we'll measure them at their elbows because those tend to be the parts that stick out the furthest, and then determine what width of casket we will need to give them a more comfortable appearance.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So before I jump into that, he talked about angular. We usually have forceps, so we have that little drain tube device. These are angular forceps. These are angular drainage forceps. This is I got a little crash kit of instruments I keep here when I teach at home. And both of these are used for taking blood out. So when you talked about that, things like, hey, you know what, real quick, let me pop these up here. So yeah, those are a thing. And actually, I prefer using these over drain tubes every day of the week. There are benefits and advantages to both of these. And in mortuary school, you are taught what those are. So when it comes to large individuals, so obese, morbidly obese, and the my 600-pound life and larger types, there's a manufacturer out there called Triton Casket Company. You can look them up on the internet, and they sell these just absolutely massive caskets. Coffins, not so much. So in the mortuary world, there's a difference between a coffin and a casket. Coffins are the type of things you see in movies and old westerns, all wooden, H-shaped. They look kind of they're anthropomorphical, so they look like they're the shape of a body, thicker and wider towards the upper chest, and then they slim down. Caskets don't do that. Caskets are, usually square, rounded edges, straight edges, whatever, but generally they do not fit the shape of the body. And they do come in oversize. And what you are taught actually in mortuary school is how to properly measure bodies so you don't try to stuff a 400-pound person in a standard size casket and have them look like absolute crap because it looks like you're trying to shoehorn them into the wrong product. Now, when you are dealing with morbidly obese people, and I am a morbidly obese person, I'm 6'1", I'm 330 pounds, I'm a big dude. You're not going to try to stuff me in a standard size casket. It's going to look wrong. My shoulders are all going to be pushed up. I mean, it's going to look nasty. And you do have to pay a premium for that. And when people say, well, that's really rude. Well, I don't know if you've paid attention, but when you have to go shopping in the big and tall section, you usually pay more for your clothes as well. So same rule applies here, that there are appropriate products out there that you should be using for large individuals so that they are in repose comfortably and you have a good visual presentation. But morbidly obese individuals that require larger caskets, you run into lots of problems when it comes to cremation and burial that we won't get into because it expands past that. But know that is something that your funeral director should be talking to you about. Especially if you're purchasing cemetery property, because if you have a large enough casket, it doesn't fit in a single grave, you got to buy 2 graves. Next question. Finally a decent question asked. It's a really cool question.
Do morticians put chapstick on the bodies, or are they just sitting there, casket open, lips cracked out? That's actually a great concern of ours, is drying out.
Yeah.
Not just the lips, but after you die, of course, your body is not producing any oils, so your skin can get quite dry. We actually have a heavy face cream that we use on almost everybody that comes through in the interim between when they're embalmed and when we get them ready for their funeral and put their makeup on if we need it. We always have that heavy face cream on to make sure that their lips don't dry out. So as far as chapstick goes, I've never put chapstick on a body, but if someone really wanted me to, I guess I wouldn't say no.
Yeah, and he's absolutely right. Dehydration is a major concern for a body. And time and time again, you hear old-timer funeral directors talk about, back in my day, we didn't worry about all this math and trying to do it, just put it in and we knew it was one. So the modern the modern challenge of human preservation is we have a better idea of how bodies stay preserved. So you're actually, when you're looking at a body, you are trying to gauge, and this is the art of embalming. There is a science behind it, but there is no way that you can just look at a body and determine 100% effectively every single time with mathematical precision what the end result is always going to be. There's too many challenges in between. So that is part of the art of embalming, is knowing when I am adding my preservative fluid and I am adding moisture into the body, am I adding enough so that the body will look good as time progresses and we lose moisture to the point that it's not going to dehydrate and be visually offensive to people. So he says, we have this really heavy cream. And that's one of the things I really get pissed off about with people in this massage cream stuff, because it is massage cream. That's all it is massage cream. There are a variety of different types of massage creams out there. Some are silicone-based, some are water-based, some are natural, some are synthetic. And I am not a big fan of slathering that stuff on, because it will stay there and then you have to clean it off with like a really heavy solvent, because over time it will itself dehydrate if you put too much on and creates this really nasty, greasy cream cheese sort of consistency that the only way you get it out is get in there with Q-tips with solvent and clean it. So I am a big fan of light applications. So the face should look wet when you put that massage cream on, and you reapply it on a daily basis until you're ready to apply cosmetics and the body is ready to be viewed. There are some other really cool products out there that some manufacturers use. They call it stone oil. It's basically white petroleum jelly. I'm a real big fan of that stuff. I love it. And you use it very similar to massage cream. And again, that's a personal preference thing. He's not wrong in what he's saying. We absolutely do this. And we will put massage cream on the lips to keep them moisturized. And it's not just that the massage cream keeps the face moisturized. It provides a barrier against the air currents around it. One of the biggest disadvantages to human remains being laid out is air currents that pass over the body because of fans, doors open, stuff like that. So it's why we cover bodies with cloth to protect their modesty, yes, but a secondary thing that also happens is that helps trap air inside so it doesn't swirl around and wick the air out of your pores, because that is something that happens and is a great concern to embalmers. So my only comment that would be like is a thick application of massage cream, and I know what that is, something that a lot of embalmers do, and that's something that I did early in my career. But in modern practice, I teach my students to put light applications of massage cream. If you're seeing a lot of white, it's probably too much, and reapply it as you need it, because you should be checking your bodies daily anyways. You don't have to go too terribly crazy.
Here's a question from Coco.
But
Now
like he
I'm
says,
going
yeah,
on
chapstick.
Google, looking up the
We'll put
weirdest
chapstick.
stuff.
If someone told me to
What
put
do
chapstick,
dead
I'd use chapstick.
bodies smell like? Dead bodies smell awful. Rotting anything smells awful. We are hardwired to think that dead human bodies smell bad. And it's a smell you never forget. I myself, I went out to a nice restaurant to have some aged steak, and I couldn't do it.
Yep. So there's a difference between what do dead bodies smell like and what do decomposing bodies smell like. Those are two separate things. If you have done your job well as an embalmer and the remains are in good condition, the dead body should smell like a clean human body. Okay, but it'll probably be almost antiseptic in nature before you do anything further with it. The body should smell clean, like in a hospital setting. If the body is decomposing, well, you are going to have the smell of putrefaction and just coming at you. And a great way for this to hit you is, average human's about 150 to 170 pounds. You can imagine what a dead animal on the road smells like if you've ever had a dead piece of vermin in your roof, or you have a dead piece of vermin between your walls. Now imagine that vermin is the size of a large dog. 150, 160 pounds. It is a very pungent, powerful smell. Once you know it, it will stick with you. And the thing he says about getting an aged steak, not going to say that he's not wrong. I've never had that personally, but what I can tell you is when I first started working and I would walk through the meat section, working on autopsied bodies from the medical examiner, stuff like that, I had a really hard time when I first started, because that would trigger that olfactory memory for myself. So that is something that you, when you are in funeral service, you actually deal with is these. We already know that that scent is a very powerful sense for us, and it does stick with you. it absolutely sticks with you. So yeah, a dead body should smell clean, and when you are seeing them during their visitation and laying in repose hours, they may even smell of their regular cologne. Usually funeral homes will keep some colognes and perfumes on hand. Family will usually provide some, but you should not have the smell of decomposition. But if you have a body that is starting to decompose or is in advanced stages of decomposition, it is going to smell absolutely awful, and it will stay with you. It really gets in your head.
I love this username. This is a question from Future Corpse, aren't we all? What do morticians do with our organs after an embalming? What happens when they aren't
This damn
donated?
question.
When we do embalming, all your
Yep.
organs just stay inside your body. We can prepare them all internally. After we finish the arterial embalming, we have what's called the cavity embalming. Optimally, with the cavity embalming, you're trying to puncture the lungs, the heart, the intestines, the stomach, and then you're also going to try.
You're not going to try to shoot. You
kidneys,
need to
too.
shoot.
We actually use what's called a trocar, and I have one here. It's a hollow point spear, essentially, and it hooks up to what we call an aspirator. So
Mine's better.
it's a vacuum, essentially. Insert this in the abdomen, and then try to puncture all the hollow organs, and then the vacuum will actually draw out all those nasty fluids. If you donate your organs, typically organ donations are handled by organ harvesting companies, and they will actually work with a hospital or with me to transport the body where it needs to go, and then they'll harvest the organs, donate them where they need to, and then the body will be returned to me after that whole process.
That even happens at funeral homes. They can do so. There's a distinction between organ procurement. Okay, organs have to be taken from a live specimen. So that is why if a person is going to be an organ donor, they are kept on life support until a surgical team can arrive. The organs must be removed under surgical conditions, and it is very time sensitive. Tissue procurement can happen at the hospital, can happen at the funeral home. Does not need sterile environment generally, and funeral home embalmers and apprentices can be trained to do some basic types of, or even rather advanced, depending on how much training they receive, tissue procurement. So eyes, corneas, skin, stuff like that, that can happen just about anywhere. But he's not wrong. We have devices called trocars. This was invented in 1878 by a guy named Samuel Rogers. And the one he has a plastic Delrin handle. This is one made by a company called Slaughter, very apropos name for a embalming tool company. And it's kind of like the Cadillac of trocars. You can see this one has a little viewing glass cylinder right here. This is a very expensive instrument. This is one that actually I would not use in a prep room because it is so expensive. It's kind of cost productive. They do come in different forms. You saw his had a straight handle. This one here has a gun handle. This one is way more comfortable to use because you can just go in there and do your thing. And this is actually called a Genesis injector. So if you see the tip, it's got a little plastic protector. If I just pull this stupid thing off, it will and that's on there pretty good, but it's got a pointy tip so you can get in there like the other one. But the Genesis injector actually does not aspirate, does not suck anything out. It is strictly something that puts fluid into the body. Because he mentioned something about about piercing the organs. So if now we're going to pierce everything, okay? There's not about, hey, we try to hit the kidneys. When you're in mortuary school, you are taught that the way you properly do this, and you have to memorize, there's one of two different systems. There's a 9-region system and a quadrant system about where organs are. You absolutely are going to try to pierce the lungs, not because generally there's lots of nastiness in lungs, but if you have something like pneumonia, you have fluid buildup in the pleural cavity, you're going to want to get that stuff out because decomposition of a body is a water reaction. It's a hydrolysis reaction. You want to get out as much liquid as possible to maximize what your arterial preservative is doing. So you're going to hit the hollow organs. You're going to hit the intestines. You're going to try to get the biological matter out of the intestines. You're going to try to hit the heart, get the blood out of the heart. And this sort of thing happens after we're done the arterial preservation for reasons I'll explain. And then you're absolutely going to want to try to hit all the hard organs as possible, especially the liver and the kidneys, and especially the liver, because of the fact that when we inject someone arterially, we are doing an absolute bang-up job getting things like the skin preserved. What we are not getting is anything inside your intestines, like undigested food and feces and chyme and stuff like that. And we are not getting too terribly deep into the solid organs themselves. We are injecting our arterial fluid. It is going into the capillaries, and it is going, hopefully, to all the places that you would normally have if you ever took anatomy and physiology, the transport of nutrients and waste and everything in and out of your cellular spaces. Now, when you are injecting arterial fluid that doesn't quite penetrate very deep, generally, into the solid organs, especially the largest solid organ, which is the liver. So what you want to do is after you're done that arterial injection, you follow it up with the Mr. Pokey with the appropriate types of chemicals so that you're poking holes in these large, hard organs. And when you start sucking all the stuff out, you're making space for the fluid, this other type of preservative you're going to put in. And the more holes that are there, the more likely it is going to penetrate into those deeper areas. That's why we go and we poke holes when we aspirate and take matter out. And then as we're putting the stuff, the cavity preservative inside, we are also poking holes and making new holes and trying to get that fluid in as many places as possible. That way, there is no situation where if you have a large, hard organ like the liver, you may have a topical preservation, but the inside will decompose, and then that causes complications and gas and all sorts of other issues. If that happens in a regular body, we call that shell embalming. It's when you have a topical preservative, it actually didn't penetrate deep into the dermis, and then you start decomposing from the inside out and causes all sorts of problems. And you're taught in mortuary school how to avoid that sort of thing.
Question from Paul Matthews. Do morticians normally just drain the blood down the sink? The short answer is yes.
Right down
All
the
of
sink.
our bodily wastes
It's not the
are
sink, it's
disposed
down a table.
just like our normal bodily wastes. The sewer system that goes right to the water treatment plant.
A very interesting thing, if you ever want to find them on YouTube or some documentaries, are people that clean tanks and pumps at water treatment plants. That is an extraordinarily hazardous job because you are dealing with human feces and just ungodly amounts of death waiting to happen. Some people's like, oh, you're putting the blood down the drain. Well, every time you go poop, you're putting a turd down the drain. Okay, we're not. We could get into an argument as to which is more of a problem, but fact of the matter is, I would probably err on the side of comment or the side of logic that says feces are hell of a lot more deadly than blood because they stick around a lot longer. So hard biological matter versus a liquid biological matter that can rapidly decompose, they're both nasty. That's why we have the OSHA bloodborne pathogens rule, which is how we deal with blood and other potentially infectious materials like feces and other organic matter. But generally, once it goes into the sewer system, it's why you're not supposed to go playing in sewer drains or water treatment plants.
This is a question from Soggy Emma. Why are coffins so expensive, y'all? Just bury me raw. Well, Soggy Emma, that is definitely an option. You can be.
You want to get chucked in a hole without a casket?
A lot
Have
of
fun.
funeral homes put substantial markups on their casket. And I think it's just a way to collect money on the tail end of a service. But just like a furniture store, which would maybe mark up their kitchen tables 4 times what they actually cost, I would guess that most caskets are marked up probably 1.5 to 2 times what the wholesale cost is.
So that's absolutely true. That's absolutely true. There's no doubt. It's like, oh, caskets cost so much. And my response to that is, well, it depends on how you look at it. Okay, it is a large budget item. I get this question all the time. I get it when I do consumer workshops. You know, why do the products have to cost so much? You don't think twice about dropping $1,000 in that iPhone X. You just don't think about it. But if you're going to spend $8,000 on the casket, oh my God, that's $8,000. Well, I'm going to let you do a little bit of math. If you are one of these people that buys the latest phone every year it comes out with no absolute need for that phone, you just want to have the latest tech. Even if you put it on a payment plan, you're dropping $1,000 a year. On average, the statistic is about every 10 years, you have to pay for a funeral. You do the math. In the time that you come up with a $10,000 bill for a funeral, you have paid $10,000 in iPhones. If you simply skip every other model or every third model and take that money and put it into a savings account, when a funeral came up, you would easily have enough money to pay for any funeral merchandise. And he is absolutely true. We do not have like a 5,000% markup on caskets. Generally, it is a 100% markup. It costs double what we pay for it. So if it's a $1,000 casket, you probably pay like $2,000 for it. I'm not saying that is the way all funeral homes do their stuff. There are some people that mark things up way high because they expect you to go in and haggle. There are other places that just, this is the price, and they CarMax it, and that's the price for it. Well, I can go on the internet and I can get it cheaper. Of course you can. You absolutely can. But like anything else, if you go to a nice watch store and you pick yourself up a Hamilton Khaki King and you pay $500 or $600 brand new for it, you're getting a nice mechanical watch with a very excellent internal mechanism. You go to AliExpress and you pick up a $20 Wonder. Don't be surprised when it can't tell time a week from then, even though it's a mechanical watch. Not saying you can't buy some excellent watches on AliExpress, looking at you, Cadison, and Pagani Design. But I'm saying you're getting what you pay for generally. And an $8,000 casket that is made by an American company, it can be somewhat different from an $8,000 casket that is solely produced overseas and shipped to us as is. But if you want to be buried without a casket, that is an option. Okay, that you just need to follow any restrictions that are given by the cemetery as to what needs to happen when you are buried in that area. And generally, if you don't go in without a casket or no, you do have to go in with an outer burial container, also known as a grave liner or a casket vault. And that is true even if you are in the United States, even if you are Jewish or Muslim in some cemeteries, that you will be placed inside of this larger container, which allows for the seepage of the elements, especially in Jewish and in Muslim traditions where the body needs to be returned to the elements as quickly as possible. You want the intrusion of the elements in there to help break the body down, but what you also don't want is once the body decomposes, it forms a depression in the earth. And then as the lawnmower goes over the top and cuts the grass, you have this dip you don't know about, which increases liability for the cemetery, because as people walk across the grass and step on a grave, they may dip, between 3 inches and 7 inches and hurt themselves and then sue a cemetery. So the way cemeteries have protected themselves around that is through the use of outer burial containers. And I can tell you that I did a traditional Muslim burial early on in my career, and the body was shrouded in a traditional method and placed in the gravesite in a traditional method, but it was placed inside of a grave liner because the cemetery required that even in the Muslim section. And it was filled with dirt, lid was placed on, and then the grave was closed. There you go.
This is a question from Tiny Rain. Do morticians put a bra on you? If so, I would like my rotting corpse to not wear a bra, and would like my ghost to be wandering braless with poking nips. Well, Tiny Rain, I don't know if there's much I can do about poking nips, but we do put bras on if the family requests. And the reality is I've probably put on more bras than I have taken off in my life. Did that answer your question?
And God, that's the truth. That is the absolute truth. So the first thing you have to understand is whatever we are provided by the family, we are professionally obligated to use. So if they bring us a bra, we're going to use a bra. Interesting fun fact, though, what most people forget about, and I've had people call me out or inquire as to why. If you are particularly gifted, have a good size bosom. When you lay down, all that adipose and connective tissue flattens out over your chest. So you're not going to see, like you see in some movies, people with a perfect chest laying in a casket. You are going to look as if you are laying on a bed, period. You're going to look as you're laying on a bed because primarily, especially in biological females, the breasts are made of essentially fat with a little bit of connective tissue. So there's nothing to actually hold the form. If you want those sort of things, there are things that we can do. Basically, I call it the runway method, that some embalmers will take masking tape, push things up, and then tape around to try to hold things in place so that there is the aspect of a bosom. But generally, when you are lying in repose, your bosoms look off. If you want to go without a bra, your mortician likely doesn't care. It's whatever the family gives us. And obviously, if you do not give us a bra, or you, more importantly, because there are funeral homes that that do keep spares. There are people that will. There are businesses out there that will have extra sets of underwear and bras in case the family forgets. So if you have something like that, if that is a restriction that you wish to place upon your arrangement, that when you prepare me and you put me in my casket, make sure I'm not wearing a bra, that needs to be told to the funeral professional in case they do have a business model where they automatically put undergarments at no extra expense to the family, because the firm I got my start for, we always had spare undergarments available, either donated by other client families or purchased at thrift stores or purchased on clearance. Brand new stuff that was never used, that was just donated to the funeral home for those reasons.
This is a question from Leonard de Montague. Does a mortician feel just as sad as a normal person when someone close to them dies? The short answer of that is yes. That was one of the things, actually, I myself really worried about when I got into this profession, because at a certain point, when you see a dead body, you almost always kind of go into work mode. What can I do to help this
Mhm.
family? What can I
Yeah,
do to
on stage
repair
mode.
this body? So I was very concerned when I started doing this that maybe I would start to even think of my own loved ones as something to help or something to fix, and not really
Mhm.
take in grief like I used to. For my own family, for loved ones, my own grandpa passed away just a few months ago, and I feel just as sad about that as I think I ever would. It's just a matter of perspective and maybe where you're at the moment.
So, funeral director grief is something very special. It is something that is really challenging for us. In the many classes I teach, and at my primary full time employer, I have taught every class in the funeral service curriculum. In part time jobs around the country, I've taught all sorts of classes from embalming to things like funeral service counseling and psychology of grief. And something I focus on a lot in there is funeral director grief, because of the fact that at some point, we think that it doesn't affect us, doesn't affect us as much. But when people close to us pass away, we do feel sad. And when you say, do you feel as sad as you would for other clients? No. Why would I? I don't know my client. Okay, I don't know my client. But I know this other person that passed away. I'm going to be really sad for them. Okay, so you have to understand there is a distinction between feeling bad that someone died and a family is going through loss. And I have that for every family that I work with that goes through a death, versus a family going through a loss that is known to me personally, or the person that has passed away is related to me or a close personal friend. Those type of things hit you differently. And a tremendous warning sign you look out for when you're a funeral professional is when those things don't hit you, because there's something wrong there. It should be hitting you. Maybe over time you become a little bit more desensitized than others because you're always dealing with it, but it will hit you differently. It will always hit you differently when you know the person that passed away versus a person that is a stranger. An excellent example of this is I helped a lady whose husband passed away, probably the year I left practice and became a professor here in Miami. And I maintained a Christmas card communication with her every year. And I found out that she passed away in this last year. And I was profoundly saddened by the fact that she passed away. But I had communicated with her every year via Christmas cards since I left. That's almost a decade. That is going to hit me differently than someone posting something on Facebook that says, "Hey, my cousin passed away." I barely know this person. It might be a cousin of a student I had in school. I can feel bad that their cousin passed away, because that's something that whenever you lose a loved one, that is a sad thing. But yeah, funeral directors can process their grief differently than us because we're always around this sort of stuff. But when we start feeling immortal and that it doesn't hurt us, that's when you start having some danger zones.
Question from T. What foundation do funeral directors use to make dead people look alive? Well,
Mm,
that's a good question. All the
yep.
makeup we use is actually formulated for dead people.
Yeah.
So it's made to go on cold skin as opposed to warm skin like regular makeup. And one of the things we
Mm.
try to do is not cake people with makeup, but just do kind of light layers so that way their actual skin tone does shine through a little bit. If you've ever gone to a funeral and maybe you've seen someone in the casket who is caked with makeup, they don't really look like themselves. So one of our goals is to tone that down a little bit so they do.
So important thing there is it's not because the skin is cold versus the skin is warm. Um, That's an easy way to explain it to laypersons, but maybe that's an accurate statement based off what he was told. But I've never had it explained to me like that. What matters is something he said earlier in this video, which is dead people do not replenish oils in their skin like we do. So mortuary cosmetics made by funeral chemical supply companies, these type of makeup are conditioned for dead skin, so they have extra moisturizer, stuff like that. Do we use family makeup? Of course we do, because it can be very difficult to match a skin tone with a mortuary cosmetic. So if you bring us, something from MAC or Sephora or whatever, we're going to use that. Where do the problems lie? The problem lies in funeral directors not knowing how to apply makeup, because like he said, use light layers. You have to do lots of blending. You have to understand cosmetics. And most male funeral directors do not understand cosmetics and just layer the crap on. Well, that's the same exact thing that would happen that when you decide to go out with your friends to the club on Friday night and you're leaving at 2 a.m. and you actually get outside into the regular lighting, you might want to chew your arm off to get away with the person you're walking out with. Well, same exact thing here. If you're not blending the cosmetic the way you're supposed to, you're going to get an inferior result on the client.
Question from Lala. Approximately how much does a mortician make? The minimum and the maximum? I really couldn't say what the minimum and maximum are. The average I've read in the country is about $65,000 a year. And talking to my other friends and colleagues, that seems to be about the average for my area as well.
So that's God, get asked that so many times. Funeral director pay, folks, is extremely contingent upon the state that you're working in. And the metric that's usually thrown around that is highly accurate is that a mortician makes about as much as a teacher does, a public school teacher in that same area. Now, that is not always the case, but it is usually a very accurate statement, plus or minus $3,000 to $5,000 per year. So I think the national metric is by the U.S. government is somewhere around like 52 to 58,000. 65 is probably a modern number. I know some areas of the United States that an entry-level funeral director, fresh out of school with zero experience, that just finished their internship, maybe you're making 28 to 30,000. Here in Miami, maybe you'll make like 45 to 50,000. You have experience. I've heard some funeral directors making 85 to 95,000 a year or over that. But we are in a very special time right now where there is not a lot of personnel. So funeral directors, I don't want to say are naming their own prices, but fact of the matter is funeral directors have a wonderful option about negotiating with possible employers, because of the fact that if you are fully licensed and you have experience, well, you don't need their job if you already have one. If they want you, they have to make it enticing. The way they're probably going to do that is through bonus structure or salary incentive, something like that. But generally, he's right. And I would say a fair number is anywhere between 50 and 60,000 bucks is what you're going to see for a person with experience. If you have zero experience, you should expect something lower or a lot lower. If you have some experience, you should expect something around that 65 on up. Lots of things can influence that: base salary versus commission. I worked for a firm that didn't offer commission. Well, obviously then if I'm not making it as a salary, I'm not going to make it.
Opia Dana. Can you get half your body cremated and the other half buried? Do morticians do that?
Yeah, sure you are. Asking for a friend.
I've never done that, and I've never had anybody do this. I guess I could see it happening if you really wanted to. You would have to have a disposition permit that would have cremation and burial, and I guess we'd probably have to sign a waiver to cut someone in half. But maybe the bigger question would be, what half are you going to cremate and what half do you bury?
So that's actually a rather interesting disposition question. So, if we're going to attack that, if we're going to address that, like half cremated, half buried, it's not just some juvenile 4chan question. Just about every state is going to have a problem with you trying to do that, because there's a document that he talked about called a transit permit or a burial permit. Here in Florida, it's called a burial transit permit. This is the permit that accompanies the body, okay? And eventually states what happened to it. And When you have it cremated, the crematorium will sign off that the body was disposed of there. When we say disposed of, means that's where the body disappeared or was consumed. When you go to the cemetery, they sign off on it. That is where the body was placed, and now it is basically consumed in the eyes of the law. And once you do that, different rules start to apply to the dead bodies than prior to their disposition. So if you're trying to do a half and half, that is going to be very interesting how you would try to accommodate that under the laws of the jurisdiction in which you reside. A major issue there, he says, well, what have to you cremate and what have to you? He's downplaying it with a little bit of humor, but you have to find someone to surgically dissect that body in that fashion. We as morticians and as embalmers are not licensed to chop a body in half because you want to hit us with a chain, no, just go in there with a chainsaw and go ahead and get to town. No, we can't do stuff like that. It's like when people ask us for teeth. They got a gold tooth, an embedded gold tooth, not just like, something you can take out overnight. We cannot extract teeth. We're not licensed to do that. And the American Dental Association does not permit its dentists and its members to remove teeth on cadavers. That is not something that their licenses of dentistry permit them to do. And at least one legal source has told me that the only person that can extract teeth from a cadaver is a forensic pathologist or a pathologist in general. So a person, a medical doctor who is licensed to work on dead remains really is the only person who can go in there and do things. And that would make sense. Dentists are licensed to work on live human beings, whether you have a medical doctor of dentistry or whether you have a doctor of dental medicine, or a doctor of dental surgery. Either one of those, you work on living people. When you start working on dead bodies, that is the realm of a pathologist, and that is a very specialized field of medicine. So it's actually a very complicated situation if you were to try to do something like that. But what I would probably say would end up happening is you would probably get the permit signed by the crematory. And then when the permit is returned, then you would bury the other half of the body with the cremated remains, more than likely, so that it's a really awkward situation because I don't think there's a single state in the United States that is set up to allow for a double disposition sort of thing. Generally, when you cremate a body, then you bury the ashes or the cremated remains because they're not really ashes. Inappropriate type of term for that. The transit permit has already been disposed of. That's already been registered with your licensing registration agency, such as Vital Statistics or Department of Health or whoever in your state, because that's where the body was disposed of. The body ceased to exist when it was cremated, and then you're just going to place cremated remains.
This is a question from That Doodle Bunny. How do morticians handle their jobs without becoming emotional wrecks? That is a good question. Most morticians I know are pretty normal people. There are times where it's emotional. So you do feel it, and there are maybe days you come home where you just feel done and you don't want to work or maybe do what you're doing anymore. Yeah. But I think the fact that you can actually help people on my side of the desk, on this side of things, there are things that you can do that maybe nobody else can do. You can provide a chance for a mother to see her son one more time. It's those kind of things that keep you going in those hard times.
Yeah. Don't take me wrong. That's a very important question. You handled it excellently. That is a damn near perfect response. I would not be able to elaborate more on that. We deal with things, a lot of us, because we can. I am not a legacy funeral director. I had never worked with dead bodies before. I just have a talent for doing it. And one of the things that I talk about, again, when I'm teaching these classes for future funeral professionals, is how to decompress from this. And what I see lots and lots and lots of people doing is their normal releases. And I have to remind them when they're in school, because mortuary school is just ridiculously hard, that you have to maintain that healthy life balance. What are the things that you do to decompress? Make sure you do those things. I see lots and lots of people using video games. That's not something I saw when I first started education. There weren't a lot of gamer types that got into that. And one of the things that I did on both Xbox Live and PlayStation Network is I created groups for mortuary students to play together, because we are a group of people who do not want to have to talk to other people outside of the profession when we're decompressing, because that is really a frustrating experience sometime for us. Oh, it must be really cool working with dead body. Listen, chump, not in the mood today. I'm literally not in the mood to deal with your BS right now. Go play on 4chan or whatever. So having these areas where we as funeral directors and professionals working in death care can come together with other people is really important for us, because unless you work in the industry, you don't understand the industry. You cannot understand what it's like to be a law enforcement officer unless you work law enforcement. You cannot understand what it's like to be an EMT firefighter unless you've been an EMT firefighter. You do not understand what it's like to be a medical professional, nurse, doctor, whatever, unless you have done that job. Period. Okay? I can tell you that if you put a firefighter, a Leo, and a funeral director room and you talk about death, we have three completely separate perspectives. Three completely separate perspectives, and the stress hits us differently because of where we fall within it all. I don't want to get into a yardstick measuring who's got it worse by any stretch of the imagination. All I will say is each one of us has it differently. There are different stressors to being a cop, to being a funeral director. And generally, if a cop responds to a home and it's a drowning of a small child, that's a really bad day for the Leo. That's a really bad day for the Leo. There are some days a funeral director goes through 3 or 4 of those in a week, depending on how busy their firm is and how urban of an area and how popular the firm is. So we each have it differently. Because if you see it once every couple of months or once every year, and a funeral director sees it at least once a month, it takes a completely different toll.
This question is from Not Waving. How do you dress the deceased? I have theories. Well,
we
I would
put their
love to
clothes
hear
on them.
what your theories are, but really,
Yeah,
it's fairly simple.
I would love to hear
Kind
what
of
your theories
whip
are.
their
I love
arms
it.
through, just like you dress a baby, maybe. Oftentimes, if we have someone maybe very large that we can't move very well, or maybe someone who has outgrown their clothes, or maybe their clothes are too big, we'll oftentimes make cuts down the back and simply drape it over the front and tuck it under the back, maybe sew it in a couple places, so that way
Yeah.
it sits right on the person and doesn't look like an overlarge tent or squeeze them into their clothes like a sausage.
Absolutely. Absolutely great response. Good for you. You nailed it. Modern funeral professionals do not just immediately take the scissors right down the back of garments. Okay, we just don't do that. Do we do that? Yes. If you bring us something that we can't work with and we are forced to use it and we just have to get it on them, we will do whatever it takes to get it on them as best as we can. But generally, we do not immediately reach for the scissors to make our lives easy, because that's just rude as hell. It's like wearing a hospital gown. So we try not to do that. The overwhelming majority of us who care do not do stuff like that unless we absolutely have to. And in situations where I have to do stuff like that, I will absolutely put a couple of stitches in different places as much as I can to hold the garment so it's not just draped or whatever. But like you said, if it's a very corpulent individual and you're giving us clothes that don't fit, we'll try to tuck it down the side, but then I'll get out a needle with some ligature and I will suture the collar halves together, so at least there's a closed collar, and try to go down as far as I can comfortably without being like risking injury to myself to get the shirt there. I have found on the overwhelming majority of cases where people bring us clothes that fit, if I have to cut anything, the only thing I cut is right where the back seam is, where the belt would be on a pair of pants or something like that, just to loosen the waist enough so I can get it over. But I really don't have to cut very much if you as a family member bring me the clothes that actually fits your deceased. That's the moral of the story. If you give us clothes that actually fit, most of the time we will take whatever time it takes to just get the thing on, the garment on, so that they look good. They look good. Remember, folks, when we dress people that are lying in their caskets, you are laying down in your clothes. Okay, that's one of the things why the clothes sometimes don't quite look right 100%, because you're getting dressed and going to bed. One of the arguments for mortuary clothing that are made for people lying in caskets is they are tailored and made specifically to look right when sitting in the casket from that perspective. So there is a little bit of thought that goes into that. So just little tidbit of information.
This is a question from Trap Jason. Why don't we bury people vertically instead of horizontally? They are already dead, so why does it matter? We could save so much space. That is a great question. I think a lot of it has to do with practicality. So if you were to bury someone vertically, you'd have to dig a pretty deep hole, and it would have to be pretty narrow. You can imagine how tough it would be for, let's say, 6 people to carry a casket to the graveside and then turn it up on its end and drop grandma down the hole. You might need a seatbelt of some kind.
So yeah, I mean, absolutely. Good job answering that one. Just think about how silly that would be. Because what would happen is you would carry it over horizontal, and then you'd have to flip it on its end. And when you do that, you're going to hear the thunk as the body slides down and the feet hit the base of the casket. It's going to be extremely unsettling. Because I'm not saying all families like to watch the casket being lowered. Okay, not all of them do. But if you're going to want to see a position to be placed, you're likely going to hear something like that. And realistically, that's not culturally something that we do. It's a practical issue because then you'd have to have a crane pretty much every single time. But you pretty much already have a caterpillar or some type of backhoe or something because you're going to be placing the lid on the outer burial container. So it could be something if society said, hey, here's the way we're going to do it. But you would need containers that would absolutely fit that dynamic because now you're going to have to dig, depending on what the law is in your area, you're going to have to dig that little side-by-side hole like 6 feet deep, so there's at least a foot of dirt between the top of the casket and the top of the ground above it. That could be a little bit annoying when you're trying to dig that deep, that wide, in such a small space. Whereas if you just bring the backhoe up, it just knocks out what it has to, squares it up, and you're done. So I think that's an efficiency thing and also a societal, cultural thing.
Question from Crowbar Jones. What does a mortician do if there are artificial nails on a corpse? Keep them? Take them off?
Yeah, we take them home, we start a collection and put them on our walls.
Keeping a collection. but if you mean keeping them on, more often than not, I will. Typically, the artificial nails look nice, clean, and of course your nails underneath are pretty rough. If they have them on, I usually keep them. Other things that people might be concerned about removing, piercings, they almost always stay. If it's an ear piercing and they have their earrings in, maybe we'll take the earrings out, clean them up a little bit. Other body piercings,
we don't generally we don't play around with piercings. I will take piercings out during embalming, or I'll cover them with tape. So if they're really disgusting and grody and they've been there a while and they have lots of like dead skin built up, I will generally take them out and then I'll use a non-abrasive cleaner. My go-to cleaner for stuff like this is just Dawn dishwashing detergent. Dawn dishwashing detergent is a really, really amazing, gentle cleaner you can use on just about anything without worrying that it's going to discolor it or break it or whatever. Metals, precious, semi-precious stones, cloth. I mean, just wonderful, wonderful stuff. So absolutely what he says, yeah. More often than not, I actually put fake nails on people. That has been my experience. If fake nails are already there, I will not generally touch them. Family needs to give me some guidance as to what color to paint things. If they need a little bit of filler or something, we'll go. We need to talk about that. And generally, one of the things I really want to encourage families to do is that type of like light cosmetic work for their loved one. If you know how your grandma nails work and you are used to doing her nails and filling in because they grew out a little bit since whatever, then by all means come and do it. And if I see that there is a nail missing, then I will put a nail on and I will trim it, and then when we're going through and we're finalizing, I'll paint it up and make everything match real nice.
This is a question from Melody Jackson. Do morticians take makeup classes when getting their certifications? Ooh. Yes, we do. I have a 4-year degree. And at my college, we took courses on what they call restorative art. So this would include things like makeup and coloring, but it would also include things like putting people back together after accidents, sculpting an ear if someone has lost an ear.
So whatever state he practices, it might be one of those states that requires a 4-year degree for funeral directing. There are, I think, like 10 to 15 states that require a 4-year degree for funeral directing. The state of Florida requires a 2-year degree minimum. So every mortuary school is required to teach classes in embalming and restorative art. Now, the problem is these classes are, like he said, we're also learning how to put people back together again when bad things happen, which is where the brunt of that education occurs. Okay. There would be a benefit. There would definitely be a benefit for individuals going to beauty school after mortuary school to get an actual licensed cosmetologist certification. We do not get something like that. The color theory, the application of cosmetic stuff like that, that is, I don't want to say overlooked because it absolutely is not, but it is not at the same level as going to cosmetology school. So if you were to go to a local technical college, or say your community college or university has a licensed cosmetologist program, a workforce certification, that would be something very useful, something that actually I've wanted to take for years. It's just I've never had the time over a summer or whatever to go and do beauty school, where you learn more effective ways of shading and stuff like that. But a great many of my students here in Miami come to me from being a beautician and already understand all that color theory. And when you see people with makeup caked on and all crazy, it's because they have not, what we go through in mortuary school is not as intensive what you would go through at a beauty school to learn those type of advanced techniques. Generally, if you want something like that, you'll have to get it post-graduation, say through maybe one of the national organizations offering a workshop or whoever. But you don't necessarily get a certification. You take the class for it. And me, I just had years and years and years and years of stage work when I became a mortician. So I already knew a lot of the fundamentals of makeup before I ever took anything like restorative art in mortuary school.
Lip boy. Do morticians also give haircuts? Anyone know one that can do a nice face? Yeah, lip boy. I do give haircuts every so often, usually only to men, and usually only if it's something minor. If someone does need to get their hair done, we'll actually usually call a hairdresser in. It's fairly simple because really you're only working with the front and the sides of the head.
So that's an important thing, is when you are dealing with, you don't give haircuts. I will not give a haircut in the traditional sense, and just like he says, he wouldn't either. But if you want me to trim something up, take maybe a razor to the back and just clean up a line, or take an electric razor and trim some mustache, beard, nose hair, ear hair, stuff like that. Yeah, we do that stuff all the time. But if you actually want us to professionally do a person's hair, that really is the realm of a licensed cosmetologist. You need a person who is trained in doing that stuff to do that stuff. So I would not do that for a paying client. If the family wants to come in and give their loved one a haircut, they are more than welcome to do that. But realistically, if they want me to do something, even if it's people are like, oh, you can just give them a quick color, I can tell you what number they use. I won't do it. I won't do it because I don't do it. It is not within my professional obligation to do things that are not tied to what I do. Embalming does not deal with the restoration of color to hair. That is not something we are trained on or are taught. So as easy as even simple hair coloring can be, from a professional liability standpoint, I'll always tell people, if you are not licensed to do it, find the person that is usually licensed to do it by the state and let them do it. So hair coloring, haircuts, anything like that, sorry folks, you're going to get a beautician, or I will pay a beautician out of my pocket before I open myself up for liability like that.
This is a question from Veronica.
Ooh, stinky.
That's one of the interesting things about my job, is that I never actually know what happens after burial. If we had an exhumation, you actually have to have a court order to open the vault, and the body looks more or less unchanged. And this was maybe 50 years after the fact.
So fun part is, now there's something that I learned right here, is he's in one of these states. So I'm willing to bet he is probably somewhere maybe northeastern United States, where predominantly to do an exhumation, you do have to get a court order. Here in Florida, that is not the case. If the family wants to dig someone up, Generally, the cemetery just needs authorization from the next of kin. The state does not get involved in stuff like that. But I can tell you in places like Massachusetts for certain, if you want to exhume somebody, doesn't matter what the reason is. If it's a private reason, law enforcement can do whatever law enforcement wants to do. But if it's a private reason, you need to get a judge to say, okay, you have to literally convince the judge that you want to do something. And I know this because I, in my time, have done a number of exhumations. And one of them was husband died years ago and buried at a cemetery in Massachusetts. Wife dies down here in Florida, 20 years later. And all the family is now in Florida, and they want dad down here at the family in the family plot at the cemetery. And it took months to get this thing done because we had to go through the courts just to get the body exhumed so we could actually ship it down to Florida. That's a story for a different time, a little bit crazy. But here in Florida, all you would need to do is just get the people that are in charge, go to the cemetery, sign the right authorizations, arrange for the shipping, and be done with it. So what would the body look like? The body is going to look, like he says, it's really hard to pinpoint for a number of reasons. The first is, how effective was the embalming at the time of death? That is going to be the number one thing that influences what you're encountering with, or what you're dealing with. The second thing that's going to pop up here is you have to understand that the container that you use, the type of casket you purchased, gasketed metal versus wood, is going to play a huge difference in how that body is going to look. And in addition to that, what type of outer burial container, if you were placed in the ground, did you use? Because if you used a grave liner, that's just a concrete box with holes in the bottom so the water can go out as it seeps in. But if you use something like an actual casket vault that has some sort of plastic or metal liner, the intention of that extra liner is to prevent any sort of intrusion inside. So if you're using a casket vault with a gasketed metal casket, chances are pretty good that body's going to be very recognizable 50 years after the fact. The body may evidence lots of dehydration, the skin may be discolored to black, but the hair could be intact, the features could be intact, and you should be able to look at that body, know exactly who it is. One of the disinterments that I did was one of these cheap, low-end caskets that just drop the lid, it clicks into place, no gasket. And when they took the lid off of the out of the grave liner, the casket immediately bounced out of the thing because there was about foot and a half of water in there. But the water hadn't gotten to the top of the casket where it flowed inside, which would have weighed it down and kept it immersed under the water, which would have been absolutely horrific when we opened that up, because what the family wanted is they wanted the husband disinterred. They wanted everything inside cremated so he could be placed with mom and be placed in a niche at a new cemetery. And we had to open everything up and do it. Now, at that point, I was basically just stuck being a desk jockey. So my role in it was to show up as the licensed funeral director and get the body from the cemetery, drive it to our cremation center. They took it out. They had to deal with trying to open the lid up and cremating the things that they could. And then later on, we had to dispose of the metal casket because it was a metal casket. Rather complicated case. But if you've done your job well as an embalmer, you should literally have a body that is recognizable. But results not typical because there are so many other factors that pop into that.
Jonathan Cowip. Monty Python's Always Look on the Bright Side of Life is the nation's #1 funeral song. What's the oddest funeral music you've ever heard? I haven't heard too many strange funeral songs myself, but I do have this dream. I have a friend, and I told him if he passes away before I do, I'd really like to sing On Eagle's Wings, but like the Swedish Chef from the Muppets.
Okay, I'm not gonna lie, Swedish Chef. That's some pretty cool. That's some pretty cool stuff right there. I'm not going to listen to him sing the Swedish. I'm going to pause it there, and I think that's like the last thing that happened. So I'm going to turn the video off. But craziest music that I've heard at a funeral. I remember a young man had passed away, and he was having a memorial service. I think it was. I can't remember if it was an open casket viewing or a memorial service. I just don't remember. And I had worked very closely with his mother. He was like 19, 20, 21 years old. I mean, very young man. And one of his favorite songs, we'll just say came from an album that had the explicit lyrics label attached to the outside of it, and it absolutely had to be on the playlist. It absolutely had to be on the playlist for the visitation or the memorial, whatever it was. And that happened. Everything happened at the church. It was like an hour reception prior to the service, then the service, and we had this one heavy metal song with lots of explicit lyrics that would, pop up every 13 tracks as it looped over. I've had Dropkick Murphys. A very good friend of mine passed away from church, Frank. We did Dropkick Murphys at his funeral mass. I have, if you're asking like what type of weird music, well, I have a lot of friends, a lot of Masonic brothers from Newfoundland and Labrador, and my favorite is always Newfie music. If you don't know what Newfie music is, that's a very special type of music from Newfoundland and Labrador, Canada. Again, it all comes down to what your social cultural norms are. You're going to have music from all over the place. And sometimes when families say, hey, we want this somewhere, and you have to deal with clergy or a pastor or a priest coming into the funeral home, you may have to negotiate as to what's going to occur where, because some pastors don't want certain types of music or whatever. But like the craziest sort of stuff is just stuff that you wouldn't expect to see at a service, and so like death metal stuff like that. So that's probably like the weirdest thing that I've ever had. So that concludes the video. I'm going to say that's not a bad video. It's not a bad video. It started off with the usual chump stuff with like the kindergarten questions that I call them. But he actually gave very, very intelligent, very good responses. And where I've had a criticism of what he said, I've clarified why that is. But overwhelmingly, this is not a bad video. This is not a bad video at all. He's probably doing this for a more lay person sort of channel. I mean, it's on wired.com. And when I talk and when I present and I do things, it is much less about people outside the industry, but people in the industry, students, licensed professionals, other educators within the realm of funeral service education. So I'm going to present those things like that, like we saw with how to clean off the biological material if a cadaver keeps soiling itself. There are practical ways to do that, because the time is of the essence when you're in the prep room, especially now we have an increased death rate. So stopping to clean every single time might not be advantageous, because it will continue to purge while we are using pressure to inject preservative into the body. So you will let the body do something. And if you see something funky happening, and you are trained in mortuary school and your embalming class know when something is out of the ordinary, when something is exceptional that you need to pay attention to. Otherwise, you'll leave it as is. And then when you're done, you will do what we call terminal disinfection, which is go through, clean the body one last time, make sure everything is ready for dressing later so that the family has the best possible experience in the situation that they have. So, Nate, hey, man. This was a great idea. I've never done one of these. I'm not looking forward to editing the video back and forth, because there's no real convenient way to do that. It's actually going to be a real pain in the behind. Brother, I love you, or I wouldn't do it. So I hope that all of you who listen to this find this a little bit interesting. And if you want me to do something like this again, throw it down there. I'm not going to say like, share, subscribe. It helps build the channel, but like, share, subscribe. It helps build the channel. And if this is the type of stuff that interests you folks, then, I'm happy to do it here and there. So folks, this is Professor Finn signing off. Take care. We'll see you in the next video.
All my memories gather round her. Miner's lady, stranger to blue water. Dark and dusty, painted on the sky. Misty taste of moonshine, teardrop in my eye. Country roads, take me home to the place I belong. West Virginia, Mountain Mama, take me home. Country roads.